Good
morning.
morning.
Good morning.
Okay, we're ready. We are holding the end of Iggeres Hakodesh number Daled. So we're going to finish that today, and then we're going to move on to another letter. We're actually holding page 212, but we're going to start today from the bottom of page Kuv Vov, just to go back a bit, and then we're going to finish the chapter. As with many of these letters, the Alter Rebbe wrote them as what you would call today appeals, fundraising. And the Alter Rebbe was primarily concerned about fundraising for the new yishuv in Iggeres Hakodesh, in the Holy Land, in our Holy Land, in Eretz Yisrael. That had gone up. There was a pilgrimage, that's the word for it, that had gone by the leadership of Reb Mendel Haradoker, or Mendel Vitebsker, who was a senior student of the Maggid. And the Alter Rebbe, in fact, joined with him to make that journey. And in the middle, or in the beginning of the journey, the Mendel Haradoker told Alter Rebbe that he has to stay behind. And his mission is to spread Chassidus in the most difficult part, which is to spread, in the border, where the Chabad seat was on the border with Lithuania. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe wrote a Sefer Tanya, which is in the style of Lithuanian learning, very cerebral, as we know. So the Alter Rebbe went back, but he took it upon himself the responsibility to fundraise to help support them in Eretz Yisrael, which there, as bad as it was in Russia, in Eretz Yisrael it was even more difficult. Simply the Gashmias, simply to live and funding and so on. It was a barren and desolate place at the time. So the Alter Rebbe was raising funds, and as we'll see in the later letters, to what extent the Alter Rebbe was asking the Hasidim in Russia to extend themselves for the help of the brethren in Eretz Yisrael. So in each of these letters, he seems to be discussing other matters, but then he connects it with the Indian of Tzedakah and Tzedakah of Eretz Yisrael in particular. So the beginning of our letter, he was discussing that V'shoveha b'tzedakah, that the verse tells us that Tzia and B'mishpat Tipada and her captives, or those who return, this is done through tzedakah. And we spoke about a pasuk of L'chama Libi Bakshu Panai, and we spoke about the different levels of love that there are. Generally speaking, there's two levels of love. There's the love that we can attain and achieve on our own through our learning and understanding. And then there's a love which is given from above. And then he discusses why is it that we don't experience the love, and that is because we are busy loving other things instead of focusing our love on the Eibishter. And that is our love is being focused on the Gashmias and the Taivas of Elam Hazeh. And therefore, what needs to be done is to remove, as he uses the metaphor of the Bris Milah, to remove, as the verse says, the Umaltem es Orlas Levavchem, that we have to remove the foreskin of our heart. And he explains that there's two levels to the foreskin, as in the Gashmias Dikebris. There's the thicker husk, and then there's the membrane. And that is what's going to be when Mashiach comes. The other pasuk that says, Hashem, Umol Hashem elekechas levavcha, that Hashem will circumcise our heart. But a little bit of that, he said, can be done today. And how is that done? By breaking how do we break the husk and the foreskin of our heart today? He says that's by breaking ourselves and doing something which is very, very uncomfortable, and that is to give away of our own flesh and blood. Or we can't give literally our own flesh and blood, to give away that which could have been used to enhance our own flesh and blood, which is money. And therefore that's the idea of tzedakah. As the Alter Rebbe said earlier in Tanya, tzedakah could have been used for one's food. Dam ubosar kipsare mamash, Alter Rebbe says, where it will actually literally become one's flesh and blood. And therefore when one gives it tzedakah, that is considered like one is giving for one's flesh and blood, and therefore that has a tremendous, if you want to use the term, a tremendous therapeutic effect in being able to remove the barriers that separate between us and Hashem. And that is particularly and specifically through the mitzvah of tzedakah. So let's start now from 2 lines from the bottom of page Kuvav, and we'll finish this letter. This is the meaning of the pasuk that we said at the outset. The pasuk says tzedek will go before him. And we asked the question, Yahalech seems to be that the tzedakah will lead. That Yahalech means to lead, as opposed to Yelech will go. Yahalech will cause others to go. So the Alter Rebbe reinterprets this pasuk and explains tzedek is referring to tzedakah. Lefanov doesn't just mean before or in front, but lefanov means lefanov eloshin pnimius. Lefanov means pnimius, the inwardness. Yahalech is meloshin haylocha. Yahalech means leading. That tzedakah will lead the pnimius. Shemoilech is pnimius alev laHashem. That tzedakah is able to lead the pnimius, the innermost part of a person's heart, el Hashem, to Hashem. And then, as the pasuk there continues, which we didn't quote yet in this letter, he sets his steps. Yosim l'derech Hashem, pa'omov, his steps. Yosim will be set l'derech Hashem, in the ways of Hashem. So, in other words, it's that tzedakah. The original interpretation of the pasuk was that tzedek, righteousness, will go before him. Whatever the context of the pasuk, that tzedek, the righteousness, goes ahead of him. But based on the being pedantic in this verse, in this pasuk, Yahalech means not to go, but to cause something else to go. What is the something else? So he says, tzedek is talking about tzedakah. The fanav means the pnimius of the person. So that my pnimius should be able to go lefanav to the pnimius of the Eibishter, Yahalech, it should be able to go forward to the Eibishter. That is done through tzedakah. Because as it's written, the pasuk says in Dvarim that you shall walk in his ways, and another pasuk, that we shall walk in the ways of Hashem. So there is this concept that we have to be moving forward and advancing in the ways of Hashem. How is that being done? Tzedek lefanav Yahalech. So this idea of walking towards Hashem, and Hashem telechu, applies. This is done with Maisa mitzvahs, through the action of mitzvahs, with Talmud Torah keneged kulam, and the study of Torah, which is equivalent to them all. All of these things, shekulam eilin Hashem alidei pnimis alev. So, what are we saying over here? There is this ambition of walking towards Hashem. What does walking towards Hashem mean? Maisa mitzvahs, doing mitzvahs, and learning Torah, keneged kulam, which Torah is equivalent to them all. But how am I going to have that my mitzvahs should be actually walking towards Hashem and should be advancing v'halachta bidrachav, as we're saying here? That is, shekulam eilin Hashem, they all rise or ascend to Hashem alidei pnimius halev, through the inwardness of the heart. In other words, there needs to be the inwardness of the heart, of this love of Hashem. This love of Hashem and this deepness and inwardness of the heart has to permeate the mitzvahs that I do and the Torah that I study. Here, the Alter Rebbe is telling us a fundamental point that Chassidus came to bring. It's not just an action that we have to do the mitzvah and that's it. The mitzvah has to be permeated with the Avas Hashem. And it is that love for Hashem which is going to lead and bring us to that closeness to the Eibishter, through the mitzvah or through the Talmud Torah. And what leads to the Avas Hashem? That's the tzedakah. So the tzedakah is the key to everything. Tzedakah is the key to everything. So if one wants to learn properly, one wants to do a mitzvah properly, that's why we preface it by giving a few coins to tzedakah, so that it should be able to be done with the pnimius alev, which is the pnimius alev will then help us to be able to acharei Hashem telecha, as he says here. Because they all ascend and rise upwards to the Eibishter through the inwardness of the heart. When this is done, when the Torah mitzvahs is done with the prefacing of pnimius alev, which is which is tzedakah, they rise with greater intents, umayla and much higher. They reach far higher than through their rising to Hashem, through the power or the engine of chitzenius alev, of the external part of the heart. Pnimius alev is a much more powerful engine to help our Torah mitzvahs rise upwards to the Eibishter, and they rise to a much higher place within the Eibishter. And how do you get to the pnimius alev? That's through removing the barrier which will allow for the pnimius alev to express its love. And that's through breaking the barriers, breaking ourselves. That's tzedakah. So,
Remy, I can't get my head around this, to be quite honest, because sometimes helping somebody, not giving them, and not with money, but helping them, is much more beneficial than giving them money.
That's
So I
all.
don't,
Okay, so those are the different details in the mitzvah of tzedakah. There's tzedakah with one's money, and then there's tzedakah begufay, with one's body, one's time, one's care. Sure, that's also, I could have used that time for myself to make money. I could have used that time for myself for my own leisure. So I'm giving away as well. We're using here the expression of money because because money, of course, is the most ideal form of tzedakah, because as much time as I can give, for example, as much time as I can give someone, it's still not going to help that person's hunger. And the most basic level of tzedakah is to give someone to be able to buy food or to be able to eat. So empathy isn't going to make them feel better. And here, the Alter Rebbe is talking in the context of giving literal tzedakah, because we're talking about sending money to Eretz Yisrael. It's not going to help them if we are in we're solidarity with them, which of course is very nice. We have a solidarity parade, but they need money to be able to eat simple food, basics.
so this is really referring to the people who had gone to live in Eretz Yisrael.
No, that's the
And
end. No, that's the end of it. We're saying that the ultimate form of tzedakah, you're right, there are other forms of tzedakah, but the best and highest form of tzedakah, which is the original form of tzedakah, which is giving money.
Okay.
Of course, there are other forms of giving of oneself, but some people giving money is easier than giving of their own time. Some people giving their own time is easier than giving of money. Usually it works. If people who don't have the money, then they can give of their time. Someone who has the money should not exchange it for giving of time, because there's nothing as, as far as tzedakah is concerned, money is obviously of a higher level than solidarity.
Amen. I understand that if it's somebody who's far away, but if somebody's near you, it's not the money that they need. It's
depends
help
what
that they
it
need.
depends what. Sure, if it's we're talking about a poor person needs money. We're not talking about someone who's mourning or someone who needs my counsel or someone. We're talking about literally people who need food.
Yeah.
That's what the basic definition of tzedakah is: to help people, or to help charities, organizations. Today, tzedakah is developed into many different types of branches.
I guess at the time of the Alter Rebbe, giving people money for food was different than what it is today.
Yeah, okay, we spoke about that last week, that the type of poverty that they had then, we don't have that anymore today. As bad as it may be for some people, we have in Western countries an infrastructure of some sort of welfare system. And then within that, we have within the Jewish community a welfare system, so that really no one should be going literally hungry. If somebody's going literally hungry, then there's a problem. That means they've fallen through the net somehow. They're living in a cave, because you see someone in the street and they haven't eaten in 3 days. How was the last time you saw that, if ever? Right. So the whole science of tzedakah has changed. Of poverty. But it's still there, and money is what's going to solve that problem. Money is a very difficult, is a big challenge for people, rich people, poor people. Money is a challenge for everyone to give away. Okay.
Okay.
That's why you're saying, that's why it's so powerful, because it's so deeply ingrained within us, because it's our flesh and blood. That's why it has such power. And the power is that it's able to remove the barrier of the Pnimius Alev, and then that allows for the Pnimius Alev to motivate and engine our Torah and mitzvahs, and that is able to then rise to a much higher place than to a much higher place than what it could ascend through the energy that comes from Chitzenius Alev, from the external part of the heart. And where does the love from the external part of the heart come from? He's recapping what we learned earlier. The love of the chitzenius, of the external part of the heart, is born from the tvuna and the das lavadan, merely from them. It's a much lower level of love, because it comes from my own tvuna and das, from my own intellectual capacity, and everyone's capacity is different. So it will be a different level. It's a more relative, subjective level of love than an objective one. It does not have in it the ha'oras panim, the illumination of the pnimius of Lamaila from above. Rather, that type of that level of chitzenius alev is still is still having a hester ponim, a concealment, a hiding of Hashem's ponim, of Hashem's countenance. Ki ein ponim elyonim mi'inim lamata, because the ponim elyonim, the pnimius of the Elyon from above, do not me'inim lamata, do not illuminate and shine down here, except under one circumstance. The only way to get the pnimius of above, of the Eibishter, to shine and illuminate on us is Ella bisarusa dilatata. Remember, we discussed that last week. He waits for us to make that first move. Isarusa dilatata, the awakening from below, from us. And how do we make this isarusa dilatata? B'maisa hatzdaka, through the act of charity, of tzedakah. Hanikra shalom, because tzedakah is also called shalom. So now we're going to get into what does have to do with shalom. But before we do that, so what's he saying over here? There is the love which comes from the chitzenius alev, which is as a result of our tvuna, our das, of our understanding and comprehension of Elikus, which will generate a limited amount of love depending on what I'm able to understand and appreciate and internalize. But then there's the love which comes when the barrier of the heart is removed. That already comes from the pnimius of the Eibusher, that comes from the Lamayla. How do we get that? That requires us to make that first move. So this is the dilatata. Now, that is the Maisa of Tzedakah. Now, Tzedakah is also referred to as Shalom. Why is he telling us Tzedakah refers to as Shalom? Because he's connecting it now with the pasuk that we're all familiar with. Zesha Koso, and this is the meaning of the pasuk in Tilim, Poda b'Shalom nafshi, that he redeemed my soul b'Shalom, in peace or through peace. So the Gemara says that what is the peace? How was my soul redeemed through peace? What does it mean it was redeemed through peace? So the Gemara says this is referring to Tzedakah. Tzedakah and Gemilas Chasadim, that they're known as peace. So Shalom is able to be paida to redeem nafshi. Tzedakah and Gemilas Chasadim is able to redeem nafshi. What's nafshi? The pasuk says Dafka uses the words nafshi daika. The pasuk is particular, precise, to use the word nafshi, my soul. And what is my soul? We learned earlier, that's the Shekhinah. The level of Shekhinah that's within us, which is in a galus, which needs redemption. Remember, we started off with the pasuk towards the beginning, the very second line. The tzion b'mishpati pada v'shaveha b'tzedakah. The captives are redeemed through tzedakah. Who is the captive here? The captive here is my nefesh, which is the Shekhinah. We spoke about this 2 weeks ago. There's the general Shekhinah, which is in galus, and then there's the individual or more particular Shekhinah, which is in galus within me, and needs to be redeemed. So it's the tzedakah that's going to redeem and allow for my personal Shekhinah to be redeemed. And this is also the reason why tzedakah is called shalom, because this achieves a peace between Yisrael and their Father in heaven. As is the teaching of our sages. What do you mean it achieves a peace? It removes the barrier. Peace means that there's no longer an obstruction and a barrier between the two loved ones. And here there is this orlas levavchem, this foreskin of the heart, which is grown, partially because that's the way David created us, it's part of our condition, and partially because I've put in a lot of time and effort into enhancing that barrier between me and Hashem through we spoke about it last time, I don't want to go into it, through my Jewish mother, who made sure to wrap me up very well and take good care of me. And then after that, she trained me to take good care of myself as well. So we all take good care of ourselves, and we're all concerned about number one, and about our gashmias, and even about our taivas, and the wonderful things that there is in the world. But all of this, as nice as they may be, and as glad kosher as they may be, if that becomes the passion of my life, then they contribute to this foreskin, to this husk, to this barrier, which separates between me and the Eibishter. And therefore, when I'm able to break that barrier, even a little bit, and chisel away at it, and the therapy for that is tzedakah, that creates and achieves a shalom, a peace between Yisrael and Avim Shabashamayim. If our relationship with the Eibishter is as a marriage, then it helps bring the couple closer to each other because there's nothing interfering between them. Here we're talking about the children and their father, Yisrael and Avim Shabashamayim, our Father in heaven. That there shouldn't be anything disturbing the relationship between us and Hashem. And this is This means, how is this done? Through a pidyon, a redemption of their souls. And what is the nefesh? To redeem that nefesh, which we know is a chelak Hashem mamash, is an actual piece of Hashem, which we know is the nefesh elikis. When Alter Rebbe introduced that to us in chapter 2 of Tanya. To redeem it from where? Midei achitzonim, from the hands or from the grips of the chitzonim, of the external forces. That is the end of his explanation of these psukim at the beginning of the letter. And he gives us a whole package over here. He explains to us how our love with the Eibishter works, how we develop it ourselves, how we can ruin it, or not ruin it, but how we can obstruct it. And then he explained to us that there's the higher level of love, which is given to us from Hashem. But how do we tap into this? Through removing that which is the barrier, which is getting in the way. And he explained to us what that barrier is and where it comes from. And he explained to us how to do that. That is through the magic. The secret is through tzedakah. And we explained why. Now, the Alter Rebbe is going to come and be more. Now comes the appeal, right? At the end of the speech comes the appeal, like in any good fundraiser, right? So that's tzedakah in general. Now, this is especially the case in Tzidkas Eretz Yisrael. This is especially the case regarding the tzedakah for Eretz Yisrael. Shehi tzidkas Hashem mamash. This is not just any other tzedakah. This is the tzedakah of Hashem mamash. This is truly the tzedakah of Hashem. Why? Because this is to a place where the Shekhinah is more present than everywhere else. So here it's even more to Hashem than it is in other. Earlier he used the expression tzidkas Hashem. That when you give tzedakah, it's giving tzedakah to the Eibishter because it's redeeming the Shekhinah. Here he says it's even more so. It's tzidkas Hashem mamash, because it's the land of the Shekhinah. How do we know? Because as it is written in pasuk, Tomid eni Hashem elekecha bo. Pasuk says, Eretz, this is a land that Tomid asher Tomid eni Hashem elekecha bo. That Tomid, constantly the eyes of Hashem are upon it. And in the same vein, there's another pasuk in Tanakh, v'hoye eini v'libi sham kol hayamim. The Mishnah says that einai, my eyes, v'libi, and my heart will be there. V'hoyu, there will be there sham kol hayamim, all the days, meaning all the time. The Mishnah is always watching in Eretz Yisrael more. The Mishnah is watching everywhere, and Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is true. That's true. In Eretz Yisrael, it's even more so. V'hi, and it is this. V'hi sha'omda lanu. Right? He uses a lot of flowery, we said at the beginning, that in his letters, the Alter Rebbe borrows and quotes and paraphrases from all over Jewish literature. And here he's taking from the Haggadah. V'hi sha'omda lanu. This is what, this meaning the tzedakah, not the eyes of Hashem over Eretz Yisrael, but it is this, the tzedakah sha'omda lanu, which has stood for us, which stood by us, livdois chaye nafshenu, to redeem the chaye nafshenu, the life of our nefesh, meaning, as we said, the Shekhinah that's in our nefesh, which is in a golus within my body. And it is this tzedakah which stood by us to redeem Chayin Nafshenu me'atzas ha'cheshvim litchas pa'ameinu. This is what stood by us to redeem the life of our souls from who? From the atzas, from the schemes of ha'cheshvim, of those who are scheming or planning litchas pa'ameinu, to repel our steps, who want to harm us. Who's the Alter Rebbe talking about over here? He's not talking about the Tsar. He's not talking about the Russian government. He's talking about those who are in opposition to Chassidus and wanted to do whatever they can. The Alter Rebbe was already released from prison, that's true. I'm guessing that this letter was written after his release. But in any case, the Hisnagdos, the opposition to Chassidus, was very much there. And the opposition was very great, and there were constant attempts to try and stop the spreading of Chassidus. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, this tzedakah, particularly the tzedakah to Eretz Yisrael, this is what stands by us to help us, to redeem us from the schemes, the eitzes, utzu eitzah v'sufa, right? From the eitzah of those who are cheshvim, who are having considerations, litches pa'ameinu, to repel our steps, meaning those who want to harm us. The samad lanu la'ad, and this tzedakah will stand by us forever. Losum nafshenu b'chayim amiti mechaya chayim, to set our souls in the true life, mechaya chayim, from the life of all life, the fountainhead of all life. Lo'or be'erachaim, so that we will be enlightened by the light of life. That's a pasuk in Eiv. Asher yor Hashem pono v'tonu selo, which the Eibishter will make his face radiate with us. Selo, that's a pasuk in Tehillim. Omein ken yirotzen, Omein, may this be the Eibishter's will. So he ends off by telling us that in tzedakah in general, the way it helps and benefits us in our relationship with the Eibishter, particularly the tzedakah that was given to Eretz Yisrael, and this is what, in addition to the personal removal of my personal barrier and my relation and enhancing my relationship with the Eibishter, this is also, it's what's helping to remove the obstacles in our mission of learning and teaching and spreading Chassidus. Tzedakah. We can, as we go through these, we can understand better and more how come the Rebbe was so much more than anything else was tzedakah, which brings to mind an important note in case it was never mentioned that there was once a group of women who came by the Rebbe for dollars, and they learn every week. They learned something on the parsha, and the first thing the Rebbe said to them was, "Do you have a tzedakah box on the table when the women are learning?" And they said they should put a tzedakah box on the table. They should give tzedakah before the learning. Why before the learning? Because this is what enhances the learning. He didn't say that, but we understand that. So just to remind everyone to give tzedakah, a few pennies before you go to a shir, not just on Wednesday morning, but any shir. It's important to give tzedakah because, as the Alter Rebbe is going to learn later on in Iggeres Hakodesh, tzedakah actually helps in the learning as well. Of course, we know that the Rebbe spoke in 1988 about having a tzedakah box in the kitchen, and before cooking to put a few pennies into tzedakah, when saying Tillim to give tzedakah. Always, tzedakah should preface anything that we're doing. There should always be, it's always worthwhile to have a few coins, small coins around the bag, or little, pennies, 2p's, 5p's, whatever it is convenient for you, to be able to give tzedakah multiple times during the day. It also now during this pandemic, it came around as well, that in the times of the Tzemach Tzedek, that Tzemach Tzedek said in the time when there was a pandemic then, to try and give 18 times a day tzedakah as well. So if you have a few pennies, or if you're in Israel, a few, what's the small change over there? They still have small change, or is shekel the smallest one? I don't know.
No.
Agurot. Yeah, so it's always good. It's not how much is given, it's the fact that tzedakah is given. Okay.